The content you're about to enjoy comes from the archives of The Best You. We're devoted to the very best in personal development. With a magazine and resources dedicated to inspiring and changing people's lives, at The Best You, we work with the world's leading writers and trainers on the evolution of the self, and people whose journeys have been affected by their work and words. For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co.
Okay, ladies, gents, we're going to get started. I hope you can hear me okay, past the background noise. My speciality is in narcissistically abusive relationships and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, usually resulting from childhood trauma, not eating disorders. My familiarity with eating disorders and body dysmorphia generally comes from the strength training and fitness world. We have anorexia, and we also have something called bigorexia or vigorexia. Anorexia is usually typified by a sense that no matter how thin you get, you're not thin enough. The other end of the spectrum, amongst bodybuilders, bigorexia, no matter how big they get, they feel like they're not quite big enough. It's an issue of image. I started to work on a project recently that was a documentary. The documentary was originally to explore why there are spiraling suicide rates amongst teenagers at the moment. As many of you may be aware, there's a major mental health crisis amongst adolescents. Spiraling rates of suicide, reported anxiety and depression, feelings of loneliness. And somebody suggested to me that social media was the root, which I instinctively dismissed as scaremongering, because I had the sense that there is always going to be a group of people who are afraid of the new. They'll always be neophobic. So at one point in time, people said gangster rap was corrupting the minds of the youth and making them sick. And before that, they said it was punk rock. And before that, it's rock and roll. Before that, it was jazz. And before that, I'm sure it's a harpsichord or something. So I instinctively and reflexively said, it can't be that simple. Nothing about what I know about psychology indicates that social media could possibly have that much impact. When I began to film the documentary about childhood trauma, I interviewed a professor of psychology, and he told me what the algorithms on social media were actually doing. And then I went and checked, and I read the research, and I read what the executives of Facebook have themselves publicly admitted about social media and what has been deliberately crafted as a place to suck up people's time and their attention. And there is no length, there's no length they won't go to absorb everybody's time and attention. When you are 40, this is annoying, and it does have a negative impact on my mental health. I recently took a social media break for 1 month for the documentary, and after that, I just stopped. Because I could tell inside of 5 days that I felt a lot better. I'm 40, not 14. I wasn't raised with this. I'm Generation X. I wasn't raised with a phone in my hand. I'm not a digital native. To the 14-year-olds who are raised with a smartphone in their hands, who don't remember a time before social media, it's vastly more damaging. Their sense of what is real and what is not is much softer because of neuroplasticity. So the relationship between anorexia and social media, to use the simplest perspective that I can, anorexia is a dysregulation of perceived self-body image. There are many theories as to why this comes about. Some people lie on the genetic side of it. I generally will lie on the environmental trauma end of the spectrum for why these things happen. Now, I'm not suggesting that every young person with an eating disorder has had a traumatic childhood in their family. Culture is traumatic enough. Just normal mainstream culture is easily now traumatic enough to induce an eating disorder. Social media usage is traumatic enough to induce a full-blown eating disorder. Now, it's a dysregulation of the perceived self-image of the body. The bigorexic thinks, am I big enough? He or she looks in the mirror, and then they have an image inside their mind of how large and muscular they should be. They make a comparison. The comparison fails. then they feel bad. They feel hostile, agitated, depressed, and anxious, and that motivates them to actually do something about it to attain the goal. The anorexic and the bulimic does the same thing. Am I thin enough yet? Let me check with the self-image. How do I look? No, I'm not. Then they feel anxiety and depression. So that happens internally. And their sense of their self-image is distorted through emotional dysregulation and trauma, in my opinion. Other people will say there's a genetic component. I find that unlikely. The social media platforms, particularly Instagram and Tumblr, deliberately and consciously warp people's sense of what a body looks like. That's what a filter is. That's what photoshopping is for. That is why people who are Instagram models have particular lighting. I know the guys who are on there and some of the girls who are on there who are in the fitness side of things, they'll actually pump muscles up before photographs are taken to give them a certain look. So this is a deliberate warping of how a human body should look that then gets internalized and distorted. I only found out 2 days ago that I was doing this talk. I found out on Wednesday. So on Wednesday night, I started an experiment, and I advise you, if you care about this particular subject, to try the same thing. I've wiped out my Instagram and deleted my Facebook, but I set up a new Instagram account on Wednesday night with the intent to train Instagram to think I was a 14-year-old girl with depression, anorexia, and self-harm issues. So I went through, and inside of 7 minutes, I had trained the platform to feed me nothing but depression, self-harm images, music about killing yourself, jokes about killing yourself. It's very, very dark, very quickly. There are hashtags that are now banned on Instagram, to their limited credit. The hashtag, I don't know how familiar everybody is, but there is a hashtag called pro-ana, pro-A-N-A, pro-anorexia. I only discovered this hashtag making the documentary when we were filming in December, and I spoke to somebody who'd actually been hospitalized for anorexia, and I said to her, how has social media affected you? And she said, well, I can use social media to learn how to be anorexic. I said, what? Yeah, you can go and you can study how to be better at eating less, how to actually actively increase the self-loathing and the anxiety that promotes the eating disorder. And these young kids assist and support each other. You can check this out for yourselves on Instagram. If you set up, go through the comments, they're actively encouraging each other in this direction. It's extremely dangerous, extremely dangerous. Now, if we all went out in the street and found some kids and started saying to them, hey, you should be thinner, self-harm is a good way to control your emotions, we would be arrested this afternoon. But these guys on the social media platforms are allowed to get away with this, and it impacts millions of kids. Okay, I'm not going to hit you with a load of really, really heavy research. I'm going to go through this inside of 3 minutes. I have to cover the published research with you so that you know this isn't just a matter of my opinion. Saeed Abdul he published a piece of research called Anorexia on YouTube. Here's the thing. People go onto YouTube, kids, well, it's mainly girls. It does affect some men, but it's the highest proportion is girls. They go onto YouTube to find out information about anorexia. And a ton of these videos are promoting themselves as being to help you recover from eating disorders. They found that 30% of them had pro-anorexia messages hidden within the videos. And you say, well, it's only 30%. The disturbing trend that they also found is the girls were actually focused more on these videos that had pro-anorexia messages hidden within them. So the engagement is higher when anorexia is promoted, and less when anorexia is being told as being a mental illness and something that should be recovered from.
For complimentary resources from my book, my complimentary e-course, The Power of the Question, or recommended reads, go to www.thequestion.com/resources. For more information on my coaching or mentoring, go to www.bernardo-moya.com.
A lady in Australia called Farduli she published a piece of research called Instagram Use and Young Women's Body Image Concerns and Self-Objectification. The link is clear. For young women, when they use Instagram, it instantly impacts their self-image and their tendency to objectify themselves. All social media does this. It reduces us to commodities, not for our benefit, for the benefit of the people who own the social media platforms. We work for them. We provide the usage, we provide the data, and we provide the content, and we do it for free. Not just the content we're placing out there, but the metadata, which is worth billions of dollars. So I actually just found a new piece of research this morning. Didn't have time to add it to the material here. They looked at young women's emotional responses to interacting with other young women on Instagram that they rated as being more attractive as themselves. And the difference in their emotional impact is instant. As soon as they interact. So if they see a girl on Instagram they rate as more attractive, if they like or comment, their emotional response immediately goes down in the minutes following that. The minutes. It's instant. It's a very, very dangerous kind of interaction. There was a piece of research published called The Association Between Social Media Use and Eating Concerns, and the results were clear. This study indicates a strong and consistent association between social media use and eating concerns. Instagram use being linked to increased symptoms of orthorexia nervosa. This is clean eating taken to an obsessive compulsive level, where people cannot do anything other than eat clean, orthorexia. Our results suggest that the healthy eating community on Instagram has a high prevalence of orthorexia symptoms, with higher Instagram use being linked to increased symptoms. All this research is new. This is a very new area of psychology. But time and again, the researchers are finding, there's a definite positive correlation between social media use and increased mental health issues. But if you look at what the papers are producing, the papers will find people in the medical community, non-published, who will say, we don't know yet. We do know. Don't believe them. Don't believe the hype. This is published research that's out there. They will all tell you, we're not sure. We think social media usage can be sometimes positive, sometimes negative. That's a message to you to say, don't do anything about it. That's a message to you to say, just wait. Wait for the experts to tell you there's an emergency. Don't wait. There's an emergency now. They need to either diminish their use of social media drastically or preferentially come off it altogether. It's poison. Latzer published a piece of research called Disordered Eating and Media Exposure Among Adolescent Girls in 2015. The more time adolescent girls spend in front of Facebook, the more their chances are of developing a negative body image and various eating disorders such as anorexia, bulimia, and exaggerated dieting. I should give a warning. If you do the Instagram experiment that I described, if you have a history of eating disorders, I don't recommend you do it. It's extremely triggering. I've been counseling in childhood trauma on and off for 20 years. It was the most disturbing thing I've ever seen, because I was faced with a collage, a literal collage. It's just a series of pictures of horror, just absolute horror that's being offered, that's being shared between teens as something that is like, it's kind of presented as half humorously. Everything is ironic, which we know in psychology is extremely dangerous. It's not good for people with suicidal ideation to joke about suicide, because some research has indicated if people are joking about it, they're more likely to actually do it and execute. So there are these joking posts all about, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I really want to be thin, I know, I'll go on a water fast for 2 days. And other 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds, and 12-year-olds are liking that and commenting and going, yes, that's great. It's at very, very dangerous levels here. So, but if you are going to run that Instagram experiment, that is only if all previous issues are resolved for you. It's upsetting. It made me feel physically sick. And that was, as I say, it was within 7 minutes. I trained the machine to feed me nothing but this hot garbage inside of 7 minutes. Instagram will say, these are tags that are associated with problems. Do you need support? Are you over 18? You know what it takes to get past that filter? This. You hit it with your thumb, and that's it. You're through the filter, and you're in to this horrifying imagery. Why is it this way? Okay. I'd like to present you with my personal hypothesis. I haven't looked into the published research behind this, but I've spoken to other psychologists, and anecdotally, they seem to think it's the same thing. My previous history, I worked as a coach and a consultant psychologist in the education system in the UK. During that time, about 5 days a week, I'd be in 5 different schools, and that went on for 5 years. I estimated I'd seen like 5,000 students or something. It was a very, very large number of students. What I would do is I'd walk into a classroom full of teenagers and I'd say, listen, I don't know any of your names and I want to know something about you. Because what do teenagers want to do? They want to tell you who they are. They want to tell you what they're all about. That's part of a healthy ego identification. They're separating from family. They're separating from culture. That's healthy, it's positive. So I'd say write down on a piece of paper and put it on the desk your name, your musical tastes, your hobbies, your favorite films, and what you're into. And everybody in the room would do that. So a few years went by, I started to notice that particularly amongst 15, 16, and 17-year-old girls, you would have a clique, usually in a classroom of 30, of 6. A group of 6 over here, a group of 6 over here. And whatever the alpha female of each clique, how she wrote her name tag, they would copy exactly. The font, the colors. I never told them where to put the music. I didn't tell them where to put their favorite films. But they would copy exactly what the rest of the people in the clique did. I personally think, even though we can see tendencies amongst young men to conform with peer pressure, it's stronger in young girls. Why is this a problem on social media? Again, this is just my hypothesis. This is not published research. Everybody has a sense of what their tribe is. It's a very innate, evolved human tendency. And there is going to be a sense of needing to conform to the standards and the norms of the tribe. I suspect that amongst adolescent girls of around 15, 16, 17, that drive to conform with the tribe is at a peak. It's at an absolute peak at that age. So you'd say, well, why is this a problem? Because if they're on social media for more than 6 hours a day, their sense of who their tribe is distorted. Let me say it like this. I'm a 14-year-old girl. I have mental health issues like depression and anxiety. And I think that I'm going to feel better about myself if I can attain this body image standard. What I do on Instagram and on Facebook is I start following models. I start following fitness models, and I follow hashtag Fitspiration and hashtag Thinspiration. For those who don't know, this hashtag leads to just endless images of bodies that are in a certain way. If it's hashtag Fitspiration, I'll be looking at pictures of well-muscled, ripped female models. If it's Thinspiration, I'll be looking at anorexics and bulimics. The comments under these pictures are things like applauding other girls for being able to see their collarbones, for being able to see their ribs. That's wonderful. This, your body is goals. That's a common thing that you'll see written. So I'm a 14-year-old girl and I'm doing that. What is the division now between my sense of what my tribe is between the real world and online? I don't know. Is it 50-50? Is it 30-70? Maybe I have these people are my actual real world friends, but then I have 15 other people who I'm telling my brain are the rest of my tribe, these fitness models. Now, you might go, but it's not real. Yeah, it's not real to me and you because our boundaries are a little bit tougher. But when you're a 14-year-old kid, your boundaries are very weak. And they are spending time with them, effectively. Because they go there, they go on their profile, they comment and they like it. And in their head, they're getting the dopamine release the same way that you would if you had a conversation with somebody. And so they have this imagined bond. So that person becomes a member of their tribe. So now their tribe, I am conjecturing here, is actually made up of fitness models or people with eating disorders. And that's the hyper-normalized mean. Now, statistically, if I have a group of, if everybody in this room, and I'm trying to hit, I don't know, maybe another example of status, say it's money, a status example, a status indicator, and I get a sense of where everybody else's money level is, and I'm like, I'll be normal if I hit this amount of money every year. It's the same thing. They're actually calculating, going, well, what's the average body type of my tribe of 20? Well, your tribe of 20 is made up of 70% fitness models, so now your sense of what the average body type is has just gone through the roof. Not only that, you're looking at pictures of people that are photoshopped. They're completely posed, they're photoshopped, and they're digitally altered. The hyper-normalization of a warped body image is the inevitable end result of this process. What this means is that without meaning to, this young girl, this 14-year-old avatar that I've created, is actually brainwashing herself to think that these body images are normal. And she's brainwashing herself with the help of Instagram to think, if I can attain to that state, I won't feel lonely, I won't feel anxious, and I won't be depressed anymore. In Freudian psychoanalytic theory, there is the notion of the id, the ego, and the superego. For these young kids, their ego is still in formation. That which tells the ego what is right and proper to do is the superego. The superego offers injunctions down to the ego. Injunctions, which are like laws, like the Ten Commandments, and judgments. So judgment will be cast down from the superego. If the superego is damaged, either through familial trauma or abuse, or trauma at school, or bullying, or even just through exposure to social media and the horror of what they can find on there, they can end up with a damaged superego that will tend towards perfectionism. Anorexia, bigorexia, bulimia, orthorexia, they are all symptoms of a superego that's inflamed, leaning towards perfectionism. That makes sense, right? You're constantly trying to hit that perfect goal. This leads to anxiety, this leads to depression, and of course it leads to an obsessive-compulsive disorder. Because now I have to keep checking. How does she look? How do I look? I better take another picture. How does she look? How do I look? Time to take another picture. And they're spending hours and hours and hours online, usually on Instagram. Instagram and Tumblr are the ones that focus mainly on photos. What do we do about this?
For more information on collaborating, partnering, sponsoring, supporting, or speaking at any of our events, or finding out more about our legacy clubs, go to www.thebestyou.co. If you're interested in finding out more about the amazing content we have, please go to www.thebestyou.online and get your 14-day free trial now.
If a young adolescent girl has been found that if we find or we suspect that it's actually a superego injunction that's leading her to perfectionism, you've got to actually heal the superego first. There are ways of doing that, but you've got to actually deal with the inner critic that is creating these emotional flashbacks that's causing her to feel the motivation. It's the emotional flashbacks that she's going through that cause her to be motivated to engage in the eating disordered activity. What I'm suggesting is every time she opens social media and goes on Instagram, she's self-inducing an emotional flashback. This is called digital self-harm. Our relationship with social media bears little resemblance to these kids' relationship with social media. However, that tendency is changing. How many of you have been in a fight with somebody on Facebook in the last month? Yeah, you don't want to say. But that's part of the effort to get adults. Adults are being invited to engage in a lot of political arguments as a means of creating, it's kind of like a trauma bonding process. They want you adrenalized, they want you angry, they want you fearful while you're looking at the screen, because that will bond you to the screen and make you come back again and again. Another thing I'd like to say about this subject, this is based on my observation over the years and my anecdotal evidence. I do suspect that the tendency towards perfectionism and eating disorders in young girls can sometimes be caused by a narcissistic or psychopathic personality, male authority figure in the household. Sometimes female, but frequently I've seen it as being male. If that's the case, obviously we can't just treat the anorexia in the person as though it's individualized. They're in an eating disordered, encouraging environment, and that environment needs to be changed or they need to be brought out of it. Otherwise, the anorexia cannot heal. It won't heal. When addressing these issues, I think the way to do it is to be horizontal rather than vertical. You've got to help them understand and you've got to speak as equals on the subject. The reason why this is so critically important is because part of the eating disorder and perfectionism is a tendency towards shame. And it's very easy to accidentally induce an emotional flashback of shame, particularly toxic shame, if you come in too hot and heavy with authoritarian injunctions. You will sound like the superego running inside their head. You'll induce an emotional flashback and it will shut them down. So you've got to come in much more horizontally and very, very diplomatically. It's important to hear the lived subjective experience of that individual first and actually build that rapport that lets them say, okay, sometimes I feel really lonely, really depressed. I feel like all my friends are living this wonderful life and I'm stuck here on my own. But I feel if I could just attain the right body, if I could just get a bit skinnier, if I could just get down to a size, whatever, then I'd be okay. If you can get that frank admission and you can have that kind of rapport where that can be discussed and they're not shamed for it, don't at that moment go, no, don't feel that way. Don't think that way. It's wrong. Don't do that. Listen. Let it come out. Let it be expressed. I would, over time, if you're a teacher or a counselor or a life coach, look at developing some kind of a script for getting into this issue. If it's your own child, think about what you're going to say ahead of time. The way I would go with this would be to say, rather than say what you're doing is wrong, it's what you're hurting me, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting your grandmother. All of this is going to induce shame and an emotional flashback. So you go, look, be philosophical. You know, these images that you're dipping in and out of, because I see you pull your phone out and you're just going through Instagram. You see a pretty girl, you see somebody with a nice body, and initially you feel good. They get a dopamine hit from that. We all do. That's why beautiful models are on TV, because that's what we want to see. We get a dopamine release from it. Do you know that right after that dopamine release, some of the research I heard about at this crazy seminar I went to, they were saying that actually you feel really depressed after that. You wouldn't want to make yourself feel depressed, would you? Now, if you're going to do that 6, 7, 8, 9 times a day, that's dangerous. Some of the research indicates that these kids are accessing their phones 50 times a day. And they could be using it, they could be on Instagram for upwards of 7 hours. That is a lot of indoctrination. That is a lot of time to get a hyper-normalized idea of a very warped sense of what a body type should be. The other thing that I'm big on, though I don't know exactly how this could be organized, is to actually, well, I was talking to this gentleman before about it, organizing events that kids can go to that are tech-free, and everybody has to put the smartphone away. Everybody puts the smartphone away, you talk to each other, you connect with each other. This will be a hard process. I suspect they're trauma bonded to the phone, and when you take it away, they're going to go into like a kind of attachment anxiety, but we have to get through that. And secondly, their social skills are poor because they're not used to sitting there and chatting to each other without doing this, which is why even amongst us, we can walk into a bar and see a group of adults sat in a bar doing this on their phones while they're sat with each other. I used to do security work. And sometimes I'd see hen nights where the entire hen night was out on their phones, texting and posting to Instagram saying about what a great night they're having, instead of actually being in the moment with each other. Why is this happening? Because the social media, and I am a bit of a crazy conspiracy theorist, I admit, but if you see my documentary plugged in, it'll describe it all to you in detail. They have deliberately and consciously made your relationship with social media as traumatic as possible to addict you and to condition you to using the social media. What it promises you is connectivity. What it delivers is loneliness. What it promises you is stimulation and the capacity for intimacy, and what it delivers is isolation and the fracturing of society. It makes a big promise, it never delivers. I think there is scope for experientially showing some of these young people that actually they're going to get way more of what it is they really want by actually being in the moment and interacting with their peers without the phone. It's such a horrible, I haven't got my phone with me, it's such a horrible block to actually have a phone there. Like if I have my phone here, I'm blocking your face and I'm blocking mine. And it's like a symbolic way of saying I'm only giving you half of my attention. It's very hard to share and be vulnerable and generate true intimacy with somebody when you know that they're scrolling through pictures of whatever at the same time as talking to you. So it actually fractures that intimacy. I think there's a lot of scope to do is to actually get kids together, teach them how to talk to each other, and through that process, actually give them the experience of connectivity and intimacy that they're craving, that the social media platforms are exploiting and not actually delivering on. I drank so much coffee, I went through a 40-minute seminar inside of 25 minutes. Does anybody have any questions about anything I just said? Yeah. So the question was, the medical people who will see cited in the newspapers who are saying, wait for more research to come out, or the research results are mixed. There is one study that came out that said social media usage is positive, 1 out of 15. And it was in a very, very specific context. I think a lot of people don't want to sound like scaremongers. I mean, I don't. You sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist. Like, social media is the devil. I mean, it's how you use it, of course. Well, that's what I was saying until I looked at the actual algorithms. The actual algorithms on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, they've hired people from the porn industry and from the gambling industry to come in and put the features from the porn sites and the gambling sites into Facebook and into Twitter. I'll give you one example. You know, on Facebook, if you want to see what your notifications are, you pull the screen down on your app and it rolls the wheel and then a notification comes through. That's straight from gambling. It deliberately delays, no matter what your connection is, to be longer than 3 seconds, because they know that is the amount of time it takes for you to get the anticipation build up for a true dopamine release in your brain. They hold notifications back. So sometimes I'll comment on your picture and you won't see the notification for it for 8 minutes later. But we've both been online at the same time, right? So what the hell happened there? They hold the notifications back so that every 5 times you pull the lever, like you're pulling a lever on a slot machine, you get a reward, because that is the magic number to condition your neurology to keep coming back for the biggest dopamine release. That's one example. The things they've done there are really, really perverse, really, really corrupt, but that's capitalism. They've got to keep their shareholders happy, and they know the more eyeballs they have on the screens, the more their stock is going to be worth. The other reason I suspect that people are saying wait because we're getting mixed results is because there is an agenda to keep people on social media. There's an agenda to keep people there. It's big money, like scarily big money, scarily big money. I suspect that it's already been infringed upon in terms of social engineering as well. So there are certain issues now that people will be very, very emotional about, and then certain other issues, you've probably seen this. Like, why are you so emotional about that issue? But this other issue that impacts you way more, you're like, meh. Look at all of us about social media. If I talk to you, you'll go, yeah, I know social media is bad. Are you off it? Nah. Still on it. That's a conditioned response. That's conditioning. So I think there is that element to it. Any other questions? Okay, guys. I went fast through that. Right, thank you very much for your time, for your attention. If you want to know more, my YouTube channel is Spartan Life Coach, and you'll see the documentaries for you to view there as well. Thank you.
For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co.